The information contained on this tape is intended only as a supplement to our program and is not meant to replace the advice of your healthcare provider. We highly recommend that you speak with your own physician or healthcare professional for guidance and information regarding your specific conditions and circumstances. Dr. Philip Fisher is the co-founder and medical director of the Midwest Center. In this video series, he will answer some of the most frequently asked questions about anxiety, panic, stress, and our program. Why did you decide to work with anxiety and stress-disordered people?
The reason I became involved in dealing with anxious people is because they presented themselves to my office years ago, and really the only thing I had to treat them at that time were anxiolytic drugs, and the big drug back then, of course, was Valium. Shortly after I became a physician, I realized that there was a repeat pattern here, and people would come back month after month, year after year for their Valium prescription, and nothing had changed. They were exactly the same person they were when they walked in the door 6 months after I'd first seen them, a year after I'd first seen them, and on and on. It didn't take too long to figure out that there must be a better way. There must be a better approach in dealing with anxiety, and that fact prompted the creation of this program.
It seems like my insurance offers less in the way of psychological coverage. Is this the case, and why?
There's an increasing need for health care, and there's decreasing dollars to pay for it. So oftentimes people might not get the kind of psychological insurance coverage that they would be comfortable with. That's one reason I'm so fond of this program, because it enables people to cope with their anxiety problems without having to depend solely on their insurance coverage.
Why don't all doctors understand this condition?
I think doctors do understand this condition. I think the problem is this condition takes a lot of time to deal with, and the way the medical structure is set up in this country, physicians don't have the time that it takes to help people with anxiety disorders in the way that they're able to or the way they would necessarily want to. That's why I think it's critical that a person take it upon themselves in some cases to utilize resources in addition to their physician to help cope with their anxiety.
How will these tapes help me?
Tapes have a distinct advantage of being able to be repeated and rerun and watched as many times as you want. And I promise you, you'll get something a little bit different each time you listen to a tape, because you can't absorb everything all in one sitting. So in fact, in some ways, it's better than talking face-to-face with someone, because you can replay over and over again a particular area that is important and will be beneficial to you.
What causes an anxiety or panic attack? Can they hurt you?
The exact cause of panic and anxiety are not known. Panic attacks don't have any long-term damage on the human body. The effects are short-lived, they're temporary. People recover completely from an anxiety or a panic attack, of course, until they have the next one.
Will I actually pass out from a panic attack?
No, people don't pass out from panic or anxiety attacks.
If my anxiety disorder is left untreated, will I eventually lose my mind?
No, people with long-standing anxiety don't lose their minds or, quote, go crazy, unquote. They simply remain anxious and sometimes become more anxious, and of course there's a lot of physical problems that will attend someone who has chronic anxiety, so it needs to be brought under control.
Do we increase the risk of other physical problems as a result of putting ourselves through all these anxious episodes?
People with chronic anxiety can experience a number of other physical problems, including ulcer and in fact even heart attack. Recent studies have shown that men especially are prone to sudden cardiac death at a rate roughly 6 times greater than that of the general population if they suffer from extreme anxiety disorder. The good thing to know about this is that when anxiety is controlled, these tendencies can be eliminated, and you actually will strengthen your immune system when you reduce your levels of anxiety.
Could you define recovery from anxiety disorder?
Well, recovery is an ongoing process. I think that people recover with any problem they have on a day-to-day basis, and it's a continuum of practice and technique that enables people to function at a level that they're comfortable with. Eventually, when people are really at a high level of performance in their recovery, they'll be off medication, their self-esteem will improve, avoidance behaviors will disappear, and they'll function on a day-to-day basis without fear.
Is complete recovery possible?
Based on my experience, I'm confident and in fact certain that complete recovery is possible. It takes ongoing work and dedication, it takes acquiring skills, and moving forward on a day-to-day basis.
What steps are necessary to truly recover from anxiety disorder?
I think what's primarily important in understanding and coping with anxiety is education. People need to learn the skills to help control their anxiety levels so that they can face the fears they have and move forward. There are three critical areas required in dealing with anxiety. The first is understanding the condition itself. The second is gaining the skills and utilizing the educational materials available in coping with anxiety and overcoming it. And the third is facing your fears and moving forward.
What causes scary obsessive thoughts? Will I act on them?
Obsessive thoughts are basically a distraction to keep you from facing what's really underlying your anxiety. Most people never act on their obsessive thoughts.
Is anxiety a biochemical reaction that we can control?
There is definitely a biochemical element to anxiety. However, the trigger for the biochemical reaction that occurs can be controlled.
What are some of the triggers?
Triggers are any emotional or physical stressor that you're just not capable of coping with at the moment that it hits.
I don't have panic attacks, and I really don't avoid anything, but I have anxiety almost all the time. Will the program really help me?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, that's really what this is made for. Day-to-day anxiety is a terrible thing. It causes tremendous drain on your body's energy levels, on your ability to cope with life in general, think straight. It also leads to depression in about 80 to 85% of cases. And a cognitive approach, in my mind, in my experience, is the absolute best way to deal with this problem.
Some people say they feel more anxious during the first or second week of this program. Does this mean they should stop?
It's normal to feel more anxious when you first start this program because you're dealing with a lot of the issues and problems that create your anxiety. And as those are brought to the surface, some of which may have been buried under a rug for a long time naturally, as those are brought to the surface and eventually dissipated, your anxiety may temporarily increase.
It concerns me to hear people talk on the tape about body symptoms. Will I acquire their symptoms simply by listening to the tapes?
You're not going to take other people's body symptoms. The fear is there, of course, that you will, but in fact that really doesn't happen. Most people have a particular set of symptoms that they carry with them that are pretty much standard for them, and they really pick up on anyone else's, so I wouldn't worry about that. If you look at the people who are on these tapes, you can see that although at one point they probably had symptoms and problems similar to yours, you can clearly see now that they're really over those. And they got over those by using the same tape you have in your hand.
Sometimes when I'm anxious, my muscles feel weak. Is this from anxiety?
Yes, body weakness and almost any body symptom you can imagine can be caused by or made worse by anxiety. So absolutely, it's not a disease. It's a symptom of your anxiety. As long as you've been checked by your physician and know that there's no underlying organic problem, absolutely these symptoms, and they're very real. They're not in your head symptoms. They're actual, you feel these just like as if they were there right in the muscle itself or in any area that you're having problems with.
I feel dizzy all the time. Is this caused by anxiety?
Again, every symptom needs initially to be evaluated by a medical professional to be certain that there's no underlying organic cause. But the dizziness, lightheadedness, feelings of disequilibrium or being off balance are all symptoms very common with anxiety.
What test would you recommend to determine whether these are physical or anxiety-related problems?
Every case is individual, and that's why you need to speak with your own family doctor about these problems. There are certain baseline tests that any physician would do in evaluating a patient with anxiety. These are very well known in the medical community. It's not difficult to get these tests done. They're not terribly expensive, and they're not time-consuming. So it's well worth a visit to your own doctor to make certain that these symptoms are not, in fact, due to physical problems.
What does exercise have to do with my recovery from anxiety disorder?
Exercise is crucial because exercise affects virtually every aspect of your overall health. And when you're not exercising, Your body doesn't clear toxins as quickly, you don't process oxygen as readily, you don't sleep as well, your metabolism slows down, and so exercise is critical to overall good health, and anything that you can do to make your body stronger and function at a higher level will help you cope with anxiety on an easier level. You won't become as fatigued, which in turn won't lead to more anxiety. You won't become depressed as easily. And it's simply, you feel better. And when you feel better, everything works better.
How do different foods affect my anxiety level?
Certain foods are absolutely off the list when it comes to anxiety. First and foremost of which is caffeine. Has a terrible effect on people with anxiety. I really don't know anyone who can handle caffeine who has anxiety problems, because it always makes anxiety worse. It also leads to sleep disturbance, which then of course leads to fatigue, which then of course makes you more susceptible to anxiety that way. So even if the caffeine is out of your system, the effects of it linger from day to day to day. Other foods which would be also bad for people with anxiety would be sweets. Sugar especially is bad because it causes fluctuations in your glucose level, which then causes fluctuations in your body's production of adrenaline, which is the hormone that causes us to get very anxious and shaky when that happens. And there's an underlying regulatory mechanism that occurs, and there's a reason for that we don't need to go into now. But two absolute rules of thumb would be to stay off of caffeine and sugar.
I know smoking is bad for me, but I do it because I think it helps me to relax. Can smoking affect my anxiety?
In fact, people do feel more relaxed superficially when they smoke, but studies have shown that people who smoke cigarettes actually heighten their overall anxiety level. And that, of course, leads them to smoking more cigarettes, so it's a vicious circle. There's nothing that I can think of that's benefited by smoking.
I haven't slept well in a long time. What do you suggest?
Well, there's a lot of reasons people don't sleep, and it would fill a book. In fact, there are specialists who do nothing but study sleep disorders in people, so I'm not going to be terribly specific in answering this question, but there's some basic sleep hygiene things that you should talk about your physician with. Some of the simpler things you can do at home, obviously, are to limit your intake of caffeine, limit your intake of sweets, don't eat within a couple hours of going to bed, don't exercise within more than 3 hours of going to bed, always sleep in the same room, under the same circumstances, and try and go to bed every night at the same time. The human body loves a schedule. Although it may be boring to us and we may not enjoy particularly doing the same thing day to day, our bodies do, and we do much better and function at a much higher level when we do that.
What's wrong with anger? It's a human emotion. There are some people in my life who really make me angry.
There's a lot of opposing views about anger and how people should handle it. My experience has been that getting angry leads you to becoming better at getting angry again. And so I think that people should work on controlling their anger. I'm not saying to repress it entirely, but when anger becomes practiced, it becomes very easy. And when it becomes easy, then it leads to problems. And so I think people need to get a hold of their anger and modify it in some way.
Sometimes I feel angry with my parents. If it hadn't been for them, I wouldn't be like this. Isn't that true? Well,
it's easy to look outside yourself and blame someone else for your problems. And there's an element of truth to that. If it weren't for our parents, we wouldn't be here to begin with at all. If it weren't for our friends, we wouldn't have any relationship problems. So you can go on and talk like that. But the real problem always falls back to you. You need to take responsibility for your own feelings, for your own actions, and learn to deal with them.
Did I get this condition from my parents? And can I pass it on to my children?
There is a hereditary element to anxiety. As a matter of fact, there may actually be some survival mechanisms related to anxiety. When we were much more primitive, having someone nervous and hyper and anxious was a benefit to everyone, because that person served as sort of a lookout and a bellwether for problems that may be occurring to the society. But nowadays, of course, it's not usually like that, and it becomes more of a problem. So although there are hereditary elements to this, obviously the condition can be controlled through behavior modification and through proper training. So although the tendency to be anxious is inherited, what you do with it depends on how you respond and how you live your life.
My spouse just doesn't understand. Sometimes I wish he had this condition so he could be more compassionate. Am I wrong for having these feelings?
Giving anxiety to someone else is never going to help you. If your spouse felt poorly, it wouldn't necessarily make them treat you any differently. They would simply feel poorly and go on about their business more than likely. So stop the fantasies about having other people understand and feel how you feel, because it's not going to help you. You need to make yourself feel good, and that's what we're doing with this program, is teaching you how to be compassionate to yourself, because you're the only one who's ever around you all the time.
The program promotes assertive behavior. What's the difference between assertive and aggressive? I don't like aggressive people.
Aggressive people aren't terribly pleasant. Aggression means acting out in a way that's deleterious to the individual that you're encountering. Assertive behavior simply means standing up for what you believe to be right in your own mind and for yourself emotionally. And so clearly the goal is to be assertive without being aggressive, and it's not difficult to do. Again, there are books written on assertive behavior, and it's not difficult to learn. It's something that needs to be practiced, and it's something that we can all grow with year after year in our lives.
Will I lose my friends if I become more assertive?
You may lose friends if you're overly assertive. However, you won't lose real friends, because real friends will understand and accept you for who you are. Sometimes superficial relationships fall by the wayside when your behavior pattern changes.
I get anxious before I confront a situation or person. Why is this?
Well, we don't encourage confrontations, but sometimes in the course of standing up for what you believe to be true, a confrontation may occur. And it's part of life. It's an unavoidable thing to have differences with individuals. But don't think often that people consider the confrontations that you're imagining in your mind to be as serious as you do. We always look at the worst end of things, and people always take themselves more seriously than others take them. And a lot of times, issues which you may find highly stressful or confrontational may be very briefly lived in the minds of those in whom you're having these confrontations with. And so don't be afraid to stand up for yourself, because that's how you'll find out really where your friends are and where your own mind is. Because if you're not true to yourself, you won't get over this condition very well.
What suggestions do you have for dealing with anticipatory anxiety?
Anticipatory anxiety is one of the most common occurrences in people who have anxiety. They'll worry about something for days or weeks or months before it happens, or they'll worry about it for years before it happens, if it ever happens. You need to look at things realistically and take good care of yourself and speak positively to yourself about the event or the anticipated anxiety-producing event that's going to occur, and know that almost always the event is not nearly as bad as you anticipated. And in fact, once you get to the event, or once you receive the news that you're worried about, and you're able to deal with it, most of the anxiety will in fact dissipate. So the event is, the worry about the event is always worse than the event itself.
The program discusses practicing limitations, but this worries me. How do I prepare for this?
You don't need to prepare for practicing your limitations. You go out and you do the best you can do, and nobody's grading you and nobody's judging you, and if you're not successful the first time, it doesn't mean you'll never get past them. These things require constant repetition and practice, and everybody, even if they're now over their anxiety, went through stages where they didn't think that they could get through their limitations. And sometimes it requires days, weeks, months, and in fact years of repeated exposure and practice before someone is really comfortable with some of the things that were really bothering them. But I can assure you that repeated practice will end positively.
What mistakes do people make when they first start to confront their limitations and avoidances?
When people first approach their limitations and they try and change their behavior, they often view it as an all or nothing response, and they charge into it full bore, and if they don't succeed 100%, they get very discouraged. And of course, this isn't the way we do it. You don't simply jump out of an airplane with a parachute. You sit down, you look at the parachute, you talk to the instructor, you practice jumping off a ledge, et cetera, and that's how we should approach our limitations. We need to do it a little bit at a time, and don't think that that you're going to be Arnold Schwarzenegger and conquer everything the first time that you see it.
My symptoms seem to change as I go through the program. Why don't they just go away?
In this program, you're in a growth situation, and so your symptoms don't just disappear, they change. Nothing is a straight line from A to B in the human body or in the human mind. There's ups and downs, and there's 2 steps forward and 1 step back, and things change. So because your symptoms have been sort of irregular throughout the program, that's actually a good sign. I've never seen anyone simply go from Monday to Tuesday and lose all their symptoms. It's an ongoing process, it's a growth process, and it's an irregular process.
The program emphasizes the importance of frequent use of the relaxation tape. I relax when I read the paper or watch TV. Why is this tape so important?
The relaxation tape is the single most important feature of this program. People who are anxious have a very difficult time relaxing doing anything else. They may think they're relaxing, but they're not. They're just working themselves up, watching TV or cleaning the house, or oftentimes even playing with their family or children. So in listening to this tape, you accomplish several things. Primarily, you lay down a neural pathway in your brain that actually supports relaxation. You will then be able to recall this feeling of relaxation when you need it. And there'll be a lot of times when you need it, and it'll be there for you. It'll be a device, a technique you can use when you're anxious that's stored in the recesses of your brain that you can pull out and use to calm yourself down.
Is it really that important to do the homework in my workbook?
The workbook is critical. You know, this is a learning process. This is not psychoanalysis. This is not somebody free associating on a couch. This is a planned, organized program which requires your full participation. Sometimes when people seek psychological help, it's easy to talk back and forth with someone, and sometimes talk is cheap, and it doesn't affect people in a very dramatic way because they forget, because there's so much stress involved simply in the conversation. But when you have a booklet in front of you with papers on it and a homework assignment to do, you're much more likely to focus down and remember and put into practice the things you utilize in your homework.
I want this condition to be over with right now. Why do I have to take 1 week for each lesson?
This is a growth process. You can't simply intellectually understand what this problem is and get rid of it. There has to be a conversion that occurs in your mind that teaches your emotions to catch up with your intellect. And so don't expect just because you've understood this condition that it'll go away. If that were the case, you could go to the bookstore, buy a book, read it, understand the condition, put the book down, and be cured. And you know that's not going to happen.
In the program, I'm told that I must learn to think differently. What do you mean by this?
When we say you need to think differently, it's really exactly what we mean. People with anxiety tend to produce a lot of their own difficulty by the way they speak silently to themselves. And this in turn triggers or serves as a trigger for their anxiety attacks or for their ongoing state of anxiety. So what we'll do in this program is teach you how to combine your thoughts and approach things in a way that avoids these triggers. And you actually do begin to think differently. The negative response patterns that you currently have will be replaced with positive responses. And there's specific areas of this program that highlight or enable you to really see how negative you may in fact be, even though you may not feel like you are negative. I think we'll show you that you probably are. And so we'll teach you how to be less negative.
How can what I say to myself make any difference? I don't understand all this negative and positive dialogue, self-talk.
What you say to yourself makes all the difference. You know, all day long we talk to ourselves. 99% of what goes on in our life happens inside our brain, and only 1% of it happens outside our brain. Most of the conversations we have every day occur with ourselves, and it's directly related to how we feel about ourselves. So you can choose to be good to yourself, or you can choose to be bad to yourself. And of course, we're going to teach you overwhelmingly how to be good to yourself.
What if I don't believe all my own positive self-talk?
Well, initially you won't believe them because they're so unique and they're different from what you're used to thinking. Most of you have had so many negative responses for so long, you might not know a positive response if it came and hit you in the head. And in fact, it will take practice over and over and over to develop techniques for producing positive responses in your brain.
In your opinion, what constitutes failure? When should I give up on trying to solve this problem?
You only fail when you quit. And as long as you're trying, you're not failing. You can only fail when you stop trying. And so with this problem in particular, we don't acknowledge failure because really no one stops trying. And if you follow the outline and the program that we've given you in this course and really apply yourself, you're not going to fail.
The program has made me reconsider some long-held beliefs and expectations that I put on myself. Why do I need to change some of these?
Long-held beliefs may or may not be realistic. In fact, a lot of people hold beliefs that they feel are critical for their life and find down the road that they were in fact not, and that they really stood in the way of personal growth. You know, without change, there can be no growth without change. And change involves often changing your beliefs. And we're not out to change you into somebody you don't want to be. We're here to help you become what you're capable of being.
Is it a good idea to review some of the previous lessons as I go along through the program?
It's absolutely critical to maintain a pattern of review for previous lessons when you're going through the Midwest Center program. The program builds itself one lesson at a time, and it's a foundation. And if your memory's not particularly good, and if you don't practice things over and over again, you may forget some of the things you've learned after several weeks, which are critical to further growth. So it certainly never hurts to review, and in fact will be very helpful.
Are avoidance behaviors things like not being able to drive or not being able to leave the house?
No, avoidances are more than physical situations. Avoidances are applied to life and interpersonal relationships on a daily basis. People may be in a job that they're not comfortable with, but they're afraid to leave because of the uncertainty involved. The same thing goes for relationships, or even participating in social events. And so avoidance behaviors extend to virtually every aspect of human life, and to almost every emotional interchange that people have with other individuals. And it's all part and parcel of the same package.
Isn't guilt a good thing that helps keep us in line?
To some degree, guilt may be of some use because it lets people reflect on their behavior. But excessive guilt leads to worry and anxiety. And there are certain things that are probably worth being guilty about and certain things that are not. And of course, only an individual can decide that for themselves. But when we continuously feel guilt all day long about a multitude of different things, clearly that's not normal and needs dealing with.
There are things in my past that I feel bad or guilty about. I can't seem to get past them. What do I do?
For those of you who have events in your past that you're really concerned about and that weigh heavily on your mind, I really advise talking about them with someone, whether it's a professional or a good friend, and talk about it and not necessarily get it out of your system, but learn to face the issue and deal with it up front so it doesn't fester and cause an underlying anxiety condition to occur.
Sometimes I just can't stop thinking about things. Why does my mind race like this?
Sometimes people have trouble with recurrent thoughts, or they simply have one thought after another in sort of a stream. Sometimes there's a chemical imbalance that produces this, and this needs to be discussed with a healthcare professional. Other times it's just a simple manifestation of anxiety, and this can be broken or interrupted with proper technique, and the technique involves, of course, using positive dialogue or the relaxation tape to help stop this sort of pressure of thought that some people have.
Sometimes I have totally irrational thoughts. Does this mean I'm losing my mind?
No, people with anxiety don't lose their mind. They don't go insane. They don't end up in a mental institution. They simply remain anxious unless they take steps to get over it. You're not losing your mind if you have irrational thoughts. We all have moments when we're not completely rational, and it doesn't mean anything.
Sometimes I think about suicide. Does this mean I'm suicidal?
A lot of people imagine what it would be like to commit suicide. It doesn't mean that they're actively suicidal. Of course, if they are, that's a totally different situation. But just because that thought may flash in your mind at one point or even occasionally does not mean you're suicidal unless you have an active plan or are seriously suicidal, in which case, of course, you should tell someone immediately.
Why can't I control these thoughts? And why can't I stop thinking like this?
Well, the reason you can't stop thinking the way you're currently thinking is because you don't know how. And this program is designed specifically to teach you how to stop thinking in destructive ways that increase your anxiety level.
I've been on medication for a long time. When I try to stop, I feel more anxiety. What should I do?
If you've taken anxiety medication for a long time and then try and stop it, and your anxiety is still present, naturally you're going to be anxious. There are various methods for getting off anxiety medication, and they all need to be discussed with physicians. The most common way is to try a very slow tapering dose of medication, but this should not be undertaken without the express directions of the person who prescribed the medication. It may be that at the time you're trying to get off your medication, you're not ready yet. Just because you feel like you want to be off medicine doesn't mean you're ready to be off medicine, and you may have to wait a while longer before trying it.
I have the same scary thoughts all the time. Does that mean I have OCD?
No, just because you have a recurrent fear or a scary thought pattern doesn't mean you have an obsessive compulsive disorder. That's an entirely different problem, and everyone has recurrent thoughts because we all worry about things, and oftentimes until the source of our worry is eradicated, we think about something over and over and over again. So don't give yourself an additional illness. You're fine the way you are.
How can I take a positive approach to diet and health?
Diet is critical to overall health. In this country, unfortunately, we eat a variety of very poorly prepared and sometimes nutritionally deficient food. I think it's critical to focus yourself, study health, and understand what a healthy diet consists of for you on an individual basis. Since everyone is so different, it's good to find a nutritionally oriented practitioner to discuss your diet with, or perhaps do some reading if you found some sources that you're comfortable with. But clearly a lot of the fast food, junk food, sweets, excessive consumption of alcohol and other products that we take for granted in this country are deleterious to your overall health, and hence will impact your ability to handle emotional issues as well as deal with anxiety. So I think it's critical to maintain an adequate exercise program, to maintain a proper weight, to take nutritional supplements when indicated, and to think about your health the way you think about other things in your life, like your job and your money and your marriage, as one area that you need to take care of on a day-to-day basis, because unless you watch it, nobody else will.
In Lesson 12, you discuss secondary gains. What am I gaining from having this condition?
It's difficult to see what you're getting out of anxiety. There's always something to be gained. Every behavior has some type of reinforcing pattern to us. Even if it's destructive to our own health and well-being, there's something going on somewhere deep inside where there's a gain. And so it's very difficult to see this yourself sometimes.
The program says I do this to myself. Why?
Well, nobody necessarily wants to feel anxious, although since we're talking about secondary gains, sometimes we do get something positive out of being anxious. For example, people who are anxious tend to get more sympathy from those around them, and that's a positive effect. And so people who like other people's attention, even subconsciously, may produce anxiety to further their relationship, to gain something at work, to get out of doing something that they might not really want to do without having to say that they would really not rather be there. So there are a number of secondary gains, and this is an incredibly important chapter. So please pay very close attention and really work with it until you understand your own secondary gains.
Why is it important to write things down, like goals and priorities?
You know, it's been shown that people who write down goals achieve them at a rate phenomenally higher than people who don't write down goals. It puts it in perspective for you. You can see all the goals at once. It's reinforced. You can pull it out and look at it at a later date. It's critical to write things down.
Lesson 14 sounds like one I should listen to once a month or so. Is that a good idea?
Lesson 14, dealing with stress, is something that you can take out and listen to really at any time. Stress never ends. In fact, without stress, life would be incredibly boring. However, our ability to cope with stress sometimes changes based on our current situation. So it never hurts to pull out a tape and review it down the road when encountering a stressful situation.
I'm sad and a little afraid to listen to tape 15. I don't want the program to be over. Why do I feel like this?
The program is never really over. You carry it with you forever. Once you've been through this program, the things you've learned have changed you really permanently. And so although the program may have physically ended, the results and things you've learned in the program are something you'll carry with you for the rest of your life and use on a day-to-day basis. So don't be afraid to watch the program and think of it really as the beginning.
What kind of changes and gains can I expect in myself?
You're going to change into someone that you've never met before when you're done with this program. But it'll be someone you like, because you'll have gotten rid of a lot of the negatives and a lot of the anxiety issues that brought you to this program to begin with. So although you're not sure yet who you're changing into, I can assure you you'll change into someone that you're much, much happier with.
I'm finished with the tapes, but I'm not where I want to be yet. Did I fail?
The end of the tape serves as a springboard to further growth. So practice the things you've learned, and it may be several months after you finish the course before you feel really comfortable with yourself.
Will this condition come back again?
Any person under a sufficient amount of stress will manifest anxiety. I don't care who they are or what program they've been through, or whether they've never been through a program, or whether they've never had anxiety. Under the right circumstances, anyone can develop anxiety. But your ability to cope with anxiety has now been changed forever after going through these tapes. And so it'll never be probably as bad as it was, and certainly when it does happen, you'll resolve it much more quickly.
This concludes Dr. Philip Fisher's House Call video series. The information contained on this tape is intended only as a supplement to our program and is not meant to replace the advice of your healthcare provider. We highly recommend that you speak with your own physician or healthcare professional for guidance and information regarding your specific conditions and circumstances.